Welcome, and thank you for joining me for today's exploration into the date paradox. What year is it? Today we're going to be examining the current year. Is it really the year that we think it is? This will be the first theory video for many of our new viewers, although it's been some time for our experienced viewers since we've done a theory video. The point of a theory video is to give the baseline for the channel in all future explorations. And we're going back to the very major theories. What are the major theories and thesis statement for our explorations to determine the existence of Tartaria in the Old World? Let's examine the first three. Our first three theories are humanity has experienced 5 ages or eras of time. Theory 2, there was an era of a very different land. And Theory 3, we are living in a simulation. All of our explorations are designed to determine if these theories are valid or if they're not valid. All 6 of these theories are considered simultaneously in every exploration, although we tend to have the most objective evidence for Theory 1. Now, many people will no doubt debate that, but when we look at all of our explorations and the evidence that we find on the ground, we see that there is evidence that there was a previous civilization. We see that there's evidence that there may have been a very different shape to the land. Perhaps the large mesas are old trees. Perhaps Devil's Tower is an old tree. And there is mega flora and fauna that remains integrated into the land. However, our most consistent theories tend to be looking at the buildings and determining the 5 eras. We also have other theories that we may be living in a dream, or we consider the theory that history is exactly as it's told to us. There's never been any mistakes, there's never been any missing time, everything is as exactly as we want it to be. But we have to wonder if that is indeed the situation, or if it's something else entirely. A combination of these theories is also possible. We consider the 5 eras theory as the most likely because that's what we see most of the evidence pointing to. The 5 eras being divided up into 3 overall periods, one being the Golden Age, which consists of the first 3 eras in the distant past. We have the 4th era, or what we call the Tartarian Age, or the Monument Age, or whatever civilization preceded ours. And finally we have the Contemporary Age, which is our current era. A lot of our explorations focus on the time frame of either 1850, 1800, or 1750. And these are the suspected timeframes for when the last reset occurred. The reason this is such a challenge, though, is in order to go off of these dates and these years, we have to take exactly what we're told about our calendar at face value, or for granted. The challenge is that since we question the existence of our narrative and what aspects go into it, we have to realize that our understanding of the date system could be completely wrong. We believe that it's the year 2023, and our calendar is based upon the existence of a religious figure. However, there are many other calendar systems based on other religious figures or based on other critical events. We also have to remember that there were civilizations that did precede ours according to the mainstream account, and yet we have to remember why it's important to ask questions. Remember that when we have simply a picture, different historical accounts can be assigned to it. The picture of the Union Station in Kansas City. 3 different accounts. Dedication ceremony, amazing buildings that took years to complete. Dedication of a major monument across the road. Or it's a large group of refugees from a war-torn land celebrating their arrival. And any one of these accounts could be presented and could be believed. Merely a year after the event occurred, it would not take very long. And as more time passed, more people would look back, and whatever account they were given, regardless of what truly transpired, that's the account they would believe. They would have an emotional attachment to it. They do not ask questions, and therefore it becomes their reality. This is why it's important for us to ask questions when we do these explorations. This is a very intense process, because we have to consider what happens if you alter the 5 W's and the timeline. The 5 W's being who, what, where, when, and why. And let's consider this in detail and how someone could alter the 5 W's and therefore alter our timeline or our perception of the timeline. Because if you change the 5 W's, and you don't have to change all of them, You may only have to change one or two, and you can change the how. Let's look at this example, major indicators of truth. Here's what really happened. Destruction of many cities on the same day. Worldwide conflict occurring in 4 to 5 years. Vast displacement of total population, again within 4 to 5 years. It may have happened in 1850, it may have happened in 1800, it may have happened in some year we have no idea what year it is. How would we confuse the memory of what really happened? Well, let's start with the uniforms. Look at the United States Civil War. How many different uniforms were there for the Union and Confederate forces? For that matter, how many Union forces wore gray and how many Confederate forces wore blue? You might be surprised if you do your own research and find out exactly what history tells us. And that's always the difficulty with research. What are we really researching? We're researching someone else's account and someone else's research. And typically that's a fact that people don't look into, or they take it for granted. Now let's look at some more pictures. And look at these pictures. We can assign a year and an event to all of these. 1872, it was a fire. 1854, fire. 1906, an explosion. 1864, General Sherman marched through and destroyed the city. 1840 to 1920, immigration. And you can imagine other photos, the Industrial Revolution, any time frame that you really want. You can really throw any year with any event with any photo, and you can paint any sort of picture you want to. These events may have all happened on the same day, but if you assign different years to them, we've changed the when, and suddenly we've confused the how. How did all this happen? When did it happen? Who was involved? You don't have to change all the 5 W's and you can suddenly paint a very different narrative. The point behind this illustration is to show you how easy this could be accomplished. And remember, when people repeat things over and over again, they tend to accept that as fact. They have an emotional attachment to it. War, relocation, immigration, disaster, uncertainty. No one will ever question that. We have our years, we have our time frames, it's 2023. We know exactly when everything occurred. We learned history, we studied it, we repeated it, we researched it. And many people will tell you that. Well, you don't do very good research. You must be moronic because you're not accepting everything at face value. Your chronology of events is completely wrong. How could you possibly question any of this? And yet, that's the very core of the research that we do, and that's why it's very challenging. And now let's look into a very confusing aspect of it. We have many gravestones that have strange designations on them. Some with a letter, either a J or an I, and then a 3-digit number typically. Is that really indicating the year? How common is this phenomena? And as we zoom in, you see J797, it looks like. What exactly does that mean? Does that mean it's the year 797? Is there some other designation that's associated with that we don't fully understand? And here we see it on this gravestone, J777. Is the year 777? Does the J mean something else? Does it represent 1,000 years? That's what we would think. We would think if we see a J or if we see an I, a Roman numeral 1. What does it mean? Why does this have such confusion for researchers when we're trying to look at this? Well, we have to remember right now we're just actually looking at pictures of these headstones. We're not actually looking at the real headstones. Now you can go out and if you look hard enough, you'll find some headstones that actually say this and you'll see it with your own eyes. But if you do, what exactly does it mean? Does this prove anything? Well, I'll tell you exactly what it proves. Right now, you're looking at a picture of a headstone with this designation on it. If you go out and you look at the real headstone, then you're going out and you're looking at a real headstone with the letter and the numeric designation on it. However, even if you go out there and you really see that, what does that prove? I will tell you exactly what it proves. That someone, at some time, inscribed this on this headstone, J789. Does this prove anything else, even if you're really standing there, really looking at it? The answer is no. It does not prove anything. And you may be asking, why? Why doesn't it prove anything? I told you exactly what it proves. Someone inscribed that in that headstone. Now, Did they have a reason for it? We don't know. Could they have been reflecting a year or some other number for some other reason? Quite possibly. We just don't know, unless we actually talk to the person who inscribed that headstone. And we see official accounts from expeditionary armies in the distant past. And yet you notice the same anomaly. 3-digit years. Well, does that mean that this is the year? And you're looking at an account from a British expeditionary force, and we know that the British Army has a reputation for being very thorough in its record keeping. So why would they write this? The British Army, as we know it, certainly didn't exist in 804. What exactly does this mean? Or could this simply be a shorthand? Maybe they just left out the one because it was so obvious and they were just trying to save space. Or perhaps that was the military standard that they wrote orders or dates or kept records by. Unless we could actually ask the person, we don't know. And we may have accounts that tell us what their standards are, but we have to question that, especially if this is a couple hundred years ago. And you'll see more examples on it, not just from the United States or the United Kingdom, but in other portions of the world. Russia, Eastern Europe, Africa. We also have to remember there's a difference between Arabic and Roman numerals. And keep that in mind because we're going to explore that in great detail. But just with Arabic numerals, where perhaps we shouldn't see Arabic numerals, we see the same phenomena of 3 digits and what looks to be a month. What exactly is going on? Does this really prove that there is something with our dating system or our calendar? Well, we have to remember that even from our own perception, we have so many different calendars. We have so many different dating systems. What exactly does that say? What is that indicating? What do you think? Is that a year? Is that a date designation? Or is that some other number entirely? Those are always the details that we have to remember when we attempt to do this kind of research. And we don't just have this on headstones and military orders, but we even see this on coins. And here you see the more traditional I, or the 1, or the Roman I, which coincidentally also means 1, if you're going off of Roman numerals. So you see how this account gets even more confused looking at coins from the past. Is it 1736? Is it I 736? Does it really mean a 1, or is it an I? Because there's also different designations for how this I or this 1 are drawn. Is it Arabic numerals, or is it Roman numerals? You see how with so many different languages and so many different interpretations, just looking at 4 digits alone, we can come to many different conclusions. And some have even speculated that this could be yet another manner in which to confuse us in terms of what actual year it is. The challenge we have is we have to go off a baseline event. And the baseline event is the year that your society, your civilization's calendar system started in. For example, looking at this coin. Is that a I-621? Is that a 1621? Well, just looking at it, you could interpret it as 1621, and you would assume that this coin was minted in 1621. Was it? That 1 looks different than that I. Can you really tell just looking at it? Or does looking at it simply raise more questions? And again, we go back to that question, you're looking at the image, but what if you were really holding the coin in your hand? What does it prove? Well, it proves that someone minted that. But what we have to consider when we look at old coins, old headstones, old written orders, maybe there was some other purpose, or maybe something else was designated. We have to be careful not to see what it is we want to see. And that's one of the most challenging aspects of this research, because it is very alluring. And that is why the greatest challenge is remaining objective. And believe me, there are many people out there that will become very emotional just because of the fact that you're simply asking questions. Because remember, they've had this narrative repeated to them their entire lives. US coin, is that a J? Is that an I? 783? What exactly does that mean? Could it be possible that there was another year, or another system, or, as we said, another baseline event that this dating system was set on? Or does this number have absolutely nothing to do with dating? Interesting other side of this coin as well, with the good old all-seeing eye. And by all means, in the comments, let me know what you think. I mean, we could interpret these as years. That's what we want to see, and that's what we expect to see on our coins. Yet if you look at old Roman coins, you'll see that they didn't put any year on it, which is rather strange. And what year would the Romans have put on their coins anyway? You would think their baseline event year would have been the founding of their empire. Now I ask you to consider the example of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, 1989 movie, the last movie in the original Indiana Jones trilogy. And in my humble opinion, probably should have been left at that. There was a scene where Indy was going through the 3 challenges to reach the Holy Grail towards the end of the film, and he had to spell the name of God, Jehovah. And in the scene, he has a big J right in front of him, and then an I just past the J, to the upper left as you look at it. Well, thinking in English, Jehovah begins with a J, he steps on the J, and his foot goes right through it. And as he's hanging there dangling for his life, because the ground gives away, he suddenly says to himself, "Yes, in Latin, Jehovah begins with an I." And then he pulls himself back up and he steps on the I. It's something important to consider because there are different alphabets and there are different languages. And how many different languages there are in the lands right now, or in the realm, is certainly subject to debate. You can do your old Google search because we know all the answers are there, right? And it may tell you one day there's 7,000 languages, there's 8,000 languages. It's safe to say there are many different languages, many different pronunciations, and then we even factor in older languages, such as Latin, that aren't used anymore. So what conclusions and theories can we come to from this exploration? Well, let's recount and see what we have. The year may be anything, and we have no way to know for sure. Who says it's 2023? It could be any year. What's the baseline event? And how many years have passed? We may be able to piece together clues and estimate what year it truly is, if we have the baseline event. And some researchers have made some progress in doing that, suggesting potentially that a number of years, 500 to 1,000 typically, are inserted into the timeline. But then that also accepts that the rest of the narrative that we're given is correct. And the only thing that's different is one set of years being inserted into it, whether it's 500 or 1,000. Consider the fact that I and J in years could mean a different baseline event. Perhaps J means in the year of our Lord. Perhaps I means something else entirely. In the year of the Imperium? Who knows? Or they're merely there to confuse the year or prevent us from learning it. And finally, it could be possible that it really is 2023. Our baseline event is as we understand it, and everything's perfectly accurate. And it doesn't matter that our nation, our government, our society, our civilization, or wherever you live in the lands, has been preceded by many other governments and many other societies that we've been told relentlessly are corrupt and could not keep an accurate calendar. Or if they did, the oftentimes insane rulers in power, because I'm sure we've all heard how insane Emperor Caligula was, that they didn't order a change in the calendar or just discarding years. Caligula, we're told, had his horse named his co-counsel. So why wouldn't he make a decree or dictate that he's going to change the calendar? We're not going to consider this 500 years in Roman history. I'm throwing them out. And if anybody refers to them, they will face immediate and instant execution. Think about that. And finally, think about why it would be so critical for someone to control this perception. What do you think? What year do you think it is, and what do you think's going on with our calendar, our dating system? Do you think it's completely accurate? Or do you think that there are many other potential theories, other possibilities for what year it is and what our baseline event is? Let me know in the comments. Your feedback could be very useful to trying to determine the results of this exploration and future explorations, because knowing what year it is critical, or so we think. Or does it really matter as much as we believe? Let me know. It's been so long since I've been on the channel. It's a joy to be here again. As you know, I, Carl Sagan, hosted Cosmos in 1980, the greatest public television show of all time. And I am here to look for your support in my latest endeavor. I believe that scientists should be recognized as politicians, military leaders, and others have been recognized through history. This absurd alternate history that you see on this channel should be stricken, and there should be a new monument built. Of course, with my face in the position of honor on the right, in the highest portion of this monument. And perhaps there'll be space for my closest acolyte. He will, of course, be next to me on the left. His contributions in the present are suitable, but nowhere near as great as mine. And perhaps we have room for some other scientific contributors who will go on this monument. I have long desired to have a great monument that will show the greatness of science, and of course highlight my scientific contributions to planet Earth. We will call it Mount Star Stuff. This is a model, but I want this to be a reality. But I was thinking, why do I have to stop with one monument? Perhaps there are other monuments that I could use, or other monuments that could inspire building monuments of me. Think on it. How wonderful would it be to see my face in monuments everywhere, across the land? People would come from far and wide to glean upon my wise and fatherly face, and they will always seek guidance from me in the future, knowing that I'm the greatest scientist that ever lived, and not forgetting that I hosted Cosmos in 1980. Its success was not based on its soundtrack. Its success was based on my wondrous personality. And monuments could be across the world. All over the globe, you would see my face. And you would know what an important individual I am. Future generations will remember that Carl Sagan hosted Cosmos, and that he boldly led humanity into its future. And even as my memory engrams persist on the Voyager spacecraft, people will remember Carl Sagan. Future generations will see him. Because remember that even tyrants and indigenous people always appreciate science. And they recognize how important science is. And looking everywhere and seeing my face where it properly belongs, you will understand that we are a civilization that is based on science. And look how far science has carried us. And look everywhere across the globe and revel in my greatness. I have long dreamed of this moment, and I think it should become a reality. Oh, and keep looking up. You stole that from Jack Horkheimer, Carl. Well, in any event, it's been a long dream of mine. And what do you think of my plan? What do you think of monuments across the globe? Thank you for joining me. As always, explore yourself, ask questions, restore the world. Please like, comment, and subscribe.